What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode on the eAssist Dental Solutions Dental.MBA podcast. I'm your host, John Stamper, and very excited about bringing another episode to you. As many of you have been watching these episodes, there's so much clinical knowledge out there, right? In order to help your dental practice grow, your dental group grow, all of that. eAssist also is extremely vested in making sure that you get some business knowledge, right? We discuss the business side of the dental practice because, as all of you know, that's a big piece of growing and evolving in this great dental profession. So very excited and pumped to have two guests with me today. This is the first two-guest Dental.MBA podcast. So I've got Austin Moffat with me as well as T. Hughes. And both of these guys said, hey, they would be happy to let you know who they are, what they do, where they're from, and more importantly, how they got into the financial world. So Austin, we're going to go ahead and start with you. Love to have you share with everybody, again, just a little bit about yourself. And then I think most importantly, when and where did you start your career in financial management?
Yeah, totally. Thank you. And thanks for having us on. This is exciting. I'm out of San Diego, born and bred in Southern California. I've dabbled a lot throughout the country, but the sun and the beach always seems to bring me back. So happy to be here. I've got, I've been in playing around in the dental industry for about 3 to 5 years. I've had a couple clients and doing their books, overseeing some of their financial structure from a high level, if you will, for several years, clients throughout the East Coast, Midwest, West Coast, and then really just dove in full time about 1.5 years ago. And it's been wild, right? I mean, jumped right in with the pandemic. And of course, there was a huge need for accountants and bookkeepers, really just everywhere, but specifically, in dentistry with the PPP and the SBA stuff coming along, making sure everyone gets the proper information over to the SBA so that they could get their loans. Anyways, it seemed to be honestly a super blessed industry, really, having been, deemed essential. Right. And so, there's a big need for us. But for me specifically, I've been in accounting and finance really for about 7 years. I've jumped around a couple industries, primarily marketing has been really fun. I've really enjoyed that industry. But, my family is rooted into dentistry all the way up from my grandfather 50 years ago in the Los Angeles area. And my brother's really involved, on the personal finance side with dentistry. So I've always kind of been around and really the past, like I said, 3 to 5 years, I've jumped in and full-time, like I had mentioned prior, 1.5 years. And it's been fun to learn about the practices, really learning just the different, really not just the bookkeeping and accounting, but also the CFO structure and what needs that, that dental practices and dental owners, have, that big need, in their practices. And so that's been a lot of fun, really just creating awareness. Right. And so anyways, that's kind of my background there in a nutshell.
I love it. Yeah. What a great time to kind of hop in right into the field with everything that was going on. So great story. And so T, I will let everybody know that this gentleman actually was having some internet outage in his neighborhood. He figured out a way to join us, which is super cool. And he's in Maui, which is even better. But T, would love to have you share with everybody a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in the dental space for almost a decade now, and we got in owning DSOs, and what we found was a critical need in financial statements, proper financial statements, and then taking that more, because when we were looking at practices and we were ascertaining whether we were going to acquire them or not, it was really coming down to like combing through the financials and trying to figure out what was real, what wasn't, where the business actually was, the health of the business. And so DSO CFO was created from my background in having done an MBA and doing financial analysis and strategic consulting internationally, and bringing that into the dental space primarily with my partner. And that was really what was creating, or for us, was we weren't able to find the type of financial analysis that we wanted And we had many customers that were interested in having that, or, that were practice owners that wanted to have this sophistication on the financial side, but just weren't at the level where they could go hire a full controller or a CFO or someone that could really run that for them. And so this was our way of creating a solution for something that was a problem that we were facing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, you mentioned DSO CFO. So I think that's a great place to start. And maybe you can, get in a little bit more detail, letting everybody know about it. And I think more importantly, how you all are helping dental groups.
I think one area where we really get in is we provide clear financial statements delivered on time so that the practice owners can go back and they can look at what's going on with their business. And then really where I think DSO CFO excels is where we go in and we say, here is the strategic information, right? So if we're looking at your EBITDA, what is your EBITDA? Why is it important to you? And how does that information make it so you can make strategic decisions about your business? And that's where you go back and say, instead of saying, oh, well, I've got money in the bank account, looks like I can go build out Operatory 7. It is, okay, here's what your financial statements are telling you. This is what the forecast is saying. And based on the budgets that we've created, we're going to be able to say, hey, look, based on what you're trying to do, this is the trajectory of that. And I think that's really key. If you can go back and you can say, here's where I am, this is where I want to go, and this is how I want to get there, we can put that alignment in place. And so then when you're going and you're looking at your financials, it's more than just like, okay, well, my financials from last month tell me that this happened. Now it's like, okay, when you put a fractional CFO service in place, that's where you can really say, okay, well, this is where I want to go, and this is my trajectory of how I'm going to get there.
Well, and I think you're going to get into this kind of in our last question, which is what things look like in this post-pandemic world. But even just hearing you talk about that, and not that one doesn't get excited when you're super profitable, but like you mentioned, what strategic decisions are you going to do with that profit? But it's also, as you know, T, we don't know what's going to happen, right? A dental practice doesn't always know what's going to happen. And so whereas they might have a plan of something they wanted to do in the summer or the winter or next quarter, if something happens, like you said, like not taking that into consideration, can certainly, put them on the wrong path. So I love the strategic aspect of it. Super important. And with that, Austin, to you, I think one of the things that you wanted to share with everybody is, the dentistry niche that you guys have focused, right? It's everybody that you're working with is in dentistry, and therefore you're going to know all the ins and outs, all the variables, these strategies that T's talking about. That's what you guys do all the time. So I would imagine this cadence of seeing the same things, having some familiarity with what happens in a dental practice is a big part of how valuable you guys are.
Right, totally, and I mean you're spot on. I mean we've made it a point to not expand ourselves into any other companies or really industries really, and just focus on dentistry so that we can actually go in, like you had suggested, and see these things, practice over practice from, Oregon all the way down to, North Carolina, and throughout the country that, this is what we're seeing throughout the country. And, so this is, what your average, practice is doing, not only on a revenue basis, right? Because that varies, of course, not just through state, but just in general. But, this is what we're seeing. For example, we, one of the things that we do that I think really sets us apart is we've created, much like a couple other individuals as well, but we've created dental benchmarks, right, for dental practices, and where we take the gross revenue and we take the percent of that gross revenue and line it up across, their expenses. So, for example, if we're seeing that, your average dental supplies expenses is roughly, 6% of your gross revenue, and perhaps maybe even your lab fees are 5% of your gross revenue. That's what we're seeing. How does your practice compare against the rest of the industry and the averages, right? And are you high? Are you low? Do you want to get there, right? And not all dental practice is the same. Nothing is cookie cutter, if you will. So that's where we go in from, a niche if you will, and we'll say, okay, great. The industry standard that we're seeing is, roughly 6% of your dental supplies, but do you want to get that lower to increase your EBITDA, as T suggested? Okay, great. What would that look like, right? Maybe here's some suggestions, right? And so we'll go from there. And because we are so entrenched in dentistry, we have the relationships, right? And I think that's really where additional value comes into play, where we can say, great, you want to lower your percentage by even 1 point, if you will, in this area, great. We know XYZ company or manufacturer, if you will, and we can help you get to that next point. And so we try to manage our strategic relationships and our strategic partners to help really benefit the practice from a bottom line perspective. And I think that's the value in the niche. And we really cling on to that. We really we learn as much as we can on a regular basis from some of the industry leaders and see what's trending and what's not, and what do you foresee taking place in the future? Is there a pivot taking place? What is that, and how can we relay that back to our clients? And I think that gives us, in my opinion, such a step above others, that we're aware, and so allow us to come back and provide you with that information and see if we can't pivot your practice in that direction, should that be your goal.
Yeah, and I think go ahead, T, go ahead for it. Yep.
Sorry, John, I was just going to say, we see a lot in the industry of this shooting from the hip, and people just going and saying, hey, you know what? I got money in the bank account. This looks like a good idea. I'm just going to go for it. And to very successful results and very disastrous results. Yep. And for me, a great example of that is our longest client that we've had back in 2008, well before he was a client of ours, but back in 2008. And I think this is a poignant example of how critical it is to make sure that your financials are in place and that you're paying attention to them from not just what's happened in the past, but forecasting into the future. In 2008, everybody was very uncertain what was going to happen, and it started to affect the dental industry pretty heavily. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we're seeing similar patterns to what's happening now post-pandemic, right? There was uncertainty. People didn't know what to do. They were starting to look at their bank accounts. Bank accounts were starting to get smaller, and so they were thinking, wow, things are bad. And everyone started to pull away from the things that they knew were providing the revenue and providing the growth for their practices. And one of our clients decided, I'm looking at the bank account, seeing that all come back. He realized that there was a longer trajectory. And so he started looking 2 years in advance, and he started looking through a financial lens. And that's what we try to do. Look at things, still make those like from the hip decisions, like bring those things up, but look at them from a financial lens. And the majority of the practice growth, and obviously his practice is continuing to grow, but large amounts of practice growth happened in that period where he not only doubled down, but tripled down on the amount of advertising that he was spending. And that right there, I think, if you go back to what Austin was saying, it's looking at your business and making strategic decisions for that business. Now, the practice that was, not kidding you, 2 doors down from his practice, they went from the industry standard for advertising and they went down to 0, and their practice actually declined pretty significantly. Yeah. And so when you look at the business and you look what's happening in the industry, and then you make decisions based on that, which are primarily fear-based decisions, you stop looking at the financial health of the business and you start looking at the like, holy crap part of the business. Yep. And when you go and you say, listen, I want to grow my business, I believe in it, and I know I can do it. And by the way, that we have those types of conversations with clients all the time. And those are the clients that we love working with, because they're saying, hey, I believe in what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing is unique and I know I can execute. I just need someone to tell me, I think it looks good, but I need someone to help me make sure that I'm making strategic decisions that are really going to grow my business. Do you acquire that second or third practice, or is that going to be a complete disaster? Right. And I think that second practice, that a lot of these bigger, primary practices looking at that second practice, I don't think a lot of people have used that lens. I think they've just thought, I've gotten to this point. I need a second practice. obviously what I'm doing works. I'm just going to grab that second practice. And they're not looking at it through the lens of financially, does this make sense? And is it strategic? Is it a part of the way I do business, and is it consistent? And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make those educated decisions so that it's not just like, shoot from the hip. I'm going to just try this out. I've got enough money sitting around. Maybe this will work. And so we love that. We love that entrepreneurial spirit, but we don't want to be the dream killers. We just want to make sure that people are looking at things through that financial strategic lens.
Well, and as the both of you know, and I'm going to get into a little bit of a post-pandemic question here, T. Anything with finance is emotional, right? Anything with money, with finance, with the practice owner and everything that they've done and able to grow is emotional. And so, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that it's so hard to put a price on the advice and the recommendations and the insight and the support that professionals like you guys give dental practice owners, because it is in those times, like, for example, I think about now in this post-pandemic world, it does feel like a lot of practices took a deep breath, right? If you did make it through, if you're still in somewhat of a good situation, you're like, whew, and it's almost, it's like an NBA player at the end of the season. I want to take a couple months off, and kind of relax a little bit. But to your point, you have, if you don't have that strategic direction, you could find yourself in the same spot. So that's kind of the last thing that I wanted to ask you to touch on. And you kind of talked a little bit about it, is how important it is right now to still stay true to a lot of those financial principles and a lot of the things that you guys were advising, I would imagine probably before the pandemic happened, in an effort to kind of keep those practices disciplined to make sure that they're doing the right things.
Well, so yeah, absolutely critical right now. And when you look at what's happening in the industry and the types of acquisitions that are occurring, you have to be prepared for the various types of acquisitions that might happen with your practice. And so we do two things with with new clients. We sit down and we talk about EBITDA, and we find it rarer now that people don't know what EBITDA is, but we find it that people don't really truly understand what EBITDA is and what that means to the health of their business and why it's important. And so number one, we go through, here's EBITDA. This is how we're going to we will be focused on EBITDA, and we will be reporting to you what's going on with the EBITDA. Number two is we go back and we say $1 coming in, regardless of whether, if you're a successful practice, and we look at the benchmarks, and you can see our benchmarks on our website. But if you're a successful practice and you're coming back with 20% EBITDA, let's say, $1 that comes into the practice is turning into 20 cents in your pocket, right? For just easy, basic understanding, if you're looking at that at the end of the day, 20% is going into your pocket. But if you look at your expense categories and you go in and you say, I can negotiate with vendors, or I can go and I can be more strategic with this lab because they're more consistent with the type of work I'm going to do. It's going to make less work for me, or whatever it might be. Every dollar that you save from an expense side means that you're putting $1 back into your pocket. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times the mentality is, if I just spend more money on Google, if I put a new ad up in that regional magazine, I'm going to get more dollars in the door. And your question about the timing is more important than ever, to be strategic with your money. And if you're looking at expenses and you're thinking, oh, that's cool, I'm within the benchmarks. I'm even within the benchmarks that DSO CFO has. If you're thinking about it like that, it's a flawed mentality, because that dollar that you could be putting right back into your pocket is probably not as difficult to get back into your pocket as you're thinking. And seriously, this is one of the reasons why we recommend eAssist so often, is because the strategy of using eAssist is critical at reducing the expenditures that are going towards that aspect of the business. And if you can say, okay, I'm going to put eAssist in, and we have other strategic partners, but eAssist, where we use the same mentality of, okay, you use this strategic partner and it can actually reduce the amount of expenses that will be allocated to that particular function to your business. And that's where I think that if you're looking at a dental business at this point, you have to look at compartmentalizing the different functions of the business. And post-pandemic, that's more important than ever, because a lot of these areas we were kind of like, well, it's good enough. You know, the industry says that I can be at dental supplies at 6 to 8 or whatever. I'm good to go. And then now you're finding that people are being more strategic about it. They're joining different areas where they can actually reduce the expenses that are going particular to dental supplies, because they are being more strategic with that expense. And they're not okay throwing away like they were before, right? They're making changes that are specifically going to reduce that expense. And it's not just throwaway stuff like, oh, well, you know, I decided that I'm going to do this one thing differently, and it's just like easy to do. It's looking at it from a strategic standpoint. And I think it's critical that you do that, because we're in a point where we don't know what's going to happen with closures and everything like that. So if we are as tight as we can on the expense side, it will make us so we can face these problems and potential closures or whatever might happen in the future. It will make us more strategically poised to handle those problems that will invariably come.
Yeah, there's no question. It's just there as we're now kind of getting on the other side of this pandemic, and I'm sure you guys see this as professionals. There are some silver linings that happened, right? There's some silver linings from this, that practices were forced in many cases to have to make decisions that maybe before they were comfortable. I mean, let's call it like it is. I mean, for the most part, dentistry has been one of those great businesses where, for the most part, a lot of patients will go to the practice. It's, you know, it has allowed the, you know, dentists to be in more sometimes of a reactive mode, right? Knowing that in a lot of cases, your customers are going to come to you. That's rapidly been changing, as you guys know, as there's more dental practices in a lot of the cities. And so they've had to do more marketing. But then the pandemic hits, and it forced a lot of them, as the both of you know, to really, really put a magnifying glass on these items. So I would have to think that for the both of you, it's encouraging, right, Austin, to think that, you know, these are things I'm sure that you were talking to a lot of your practices about. Now they lived through it. They felt it themselves. And hopefully now when the both of you or anybody from your team, you know, provides these insight, provide these strategies, lays out the game plan for the practices, they're listening more, which I'm sure is encouraging for you guys.
Right. I mean, yeah, exactly what you said. I mean, I think more than anything, they said they're saying, okay, we got through it. You know, these things happened. A lot of times they happened a lot better than initially predicted, right? And I mean, last year was so crazy. I mean, no one could have predicted anything, anyways. But for the most part, you know, a lot of these guys pulled through, and so now, as we're starting to reflect, right, things are just about back to normal. I mean, I can't speak for but if it's almost back to normal in California, I gotta imagine it's almost back to normal just about everywhere else. But that being said, I mean, they're starting to reflect and they're starting to say, okay, we've got it. Okay, great. Okay, now we're actually starting to see our bottom line increase a little bit, right? What should we do, right? And anyway, so they're able to use some of those historical projections, right? And ultimately, I think they have more confidence in themselves. I mean, honestly, with that bottom line increase, you know, we're starting to see some dentists that maybe weren't 2 years ago thinking about buying another practice. They're starting to flirt with that idea. They're starting to look around. They're starting to wonder if they need to create a management team, or if they maybe need to spend more on marketing, right? And so we're starting to see that a little bit more because they listened and because they were able to act accordingly, and they're through the really unique time that we just all experienced.
Yeah, confident dental practice owners combined with professionals like you guys is a very powerful force. And as you know very well, the ultimate goal of what they're doing anyways is providing, you know, dental health for their patients. And the more, you know, the stronger, right, their practices can be financially, the more opportunities they have to serve those patients, which it becomes a win-win for everybody. Well, guys, listen, this has been awesome. I know the eAssist team really appreciates you coming on and speaking to this side of dentistry. DSOCFO.com, everybody. DSOCFO.com is where you can learn more about the great work that that these guys are doing in an effort to be able to move our profession forward. So thank you so much to the both of you.
Yeah, thanks, John.
T, we got through the whole thing, man. Your internet was strong. Everybody got to hear everything that you said. I can't leave this without saying hang loose because you're in Maui, right? So
thank you.
Kudos to you, and keep up the great work, guys. Good talking to you.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank
John.
you, John.
All right, take care.